Well, the biggest geopolitical event of 2025 just went down in China this past week, and you know things are serious when India's prime minister rejects not one, but 4 phone calls from Donald Trump, and instead makes his first state visit to China in 7 years to join Xi, Putin, and other world leaders for an event that many geopolitical experts are now calling the official shift of the global world order. You see, the decision to slap India with a 30% tariff was already a costly mistake for the US government. But when Donald Trump decided to impose an additional 25% tariff on India to penalize the country for buying Russian oil, this enraged the entire Indian nation, as they immediately saw this as an attack against their national sovereignty. India is the fastest growing economy in the world. They need access to inexpensive crude oil. And why should India stop purchasing Russian oil when even the United States to this day is still importing Russian uranium? It's just another example of the consistent hypocrisy coming out of the White House, and why many nations across the globe do not care what the US government says anymore. Trump's decision to penalize India, a staggering 55% tariff, may go down as the single biggest foreign policy blunder of an already historically disastrous administration. And if you don't believe me, just think about this. Just last year, Chinese and Indian armies were literally involved in a border dispute that resulted in casualties on both sides. Fast forward to today, and their leaders are shaking hands face to face for the first time in 7 years on Chinese soil. And the only reason it's happening is because Donald Trump messed up America's most important partnership in Asia. Trump promised to MAGA, but I guess it's now really clear what that acronym stands for: Make Asia Great Again. You see, we all know Donald Trump enjoys using tariffs as a way to bully nations around and force them to the negotiating table. But attack a nation's sovereignty? That's a game that India and Prime Minister Modi isn't going to play. Instead of bowing to Trump's emperor attitude, he did the exact opposite. He hopped on a plane to Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, and he made sure the world knew it. Modi posted photos smiling in a limousine with Vladimir Putin and sharing warm greetings and laughs with Xi Jinping, a direct and very public humiliation of Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the US sat helpless on the sidelines, watching years of strategy to divide Asia all fall apart overnight. The US Embassy in India sent this post on X, sharing a quote from Marco Rubio, and how the enduring friendship between India and China is the bedrock of our cooperation. But let's be honest, it's just another out-of-touch post from the US government and just a last-ditch effort to save face. But it's now time to say the quiet part out loud. The US government knows it's lost India, as Trump pushed Modi right back into the hands of his BRICS alliance with China and Russia. So in today's video, we'll discuss India's humiliation of Trump on the world stage, Asia's vision for a post-US world order, and the powerful message China sent to the world with their historic military parade. This is going to be an action-packed episode. Let's jump in. When historians look back at the collapse of the US hegemony and the dawn of the multipolar world, they may very well point to this exact blunder by Trump and the SCO summit that followed. That's how monumental this mistake truly was. As both the world's fastest growing economy and its most populous nation, India occupied a pivotal place in the US strategy in Asia. Washington's containment plan relied on the Quad, with Japan and Australia, but it was India's position on China's border that gave the alliance its sharpest edge. But now that ship has sailed, America's vision of an Indo-Pacific alignment has collapsed in real time, and with it, the core of Washington's grand strategy in the region. This is nothing short of a disaster for the neocons desperate to ignite a second Cold War with China and Russia. And if you really want to understand just how colossal a mistake this is for US foreign policy, just listen to the words of John Bolton, a former Trump advisor who now admits this mistake will cost the US for decades to come.
There's a lot of bad news here, very little good news. The West has spent decades, US in particular, trying to wean India away from its Cold War attachment to Soviet Union, Russia, buying sophisticated weapons from them, and cautioning India on the danger posed by China. This is symbolized by what's called the Asian Security Quad: Japan, India, Australia, and the United States. A lot of effort to make India more amenable to cooperation with these countries. Donald Trump in the past weeks has essentially upended that, and for a variety of reasons now sent India back toward Russia to grow closer to China, and just shredding these decades of efforts to try and change that alignment. I'm not saying this can't be fixed, but it's going to take a lot of work, and I don't see it starting anytime soon.
Now, while John Bolton insists that this relationship can still be salvaged and that Washington can return to business as usual, the reality is that that is far from guaranteed. India, once seen by its critics as an obstacle to the multipolar world because of its close ties with Washington and its willingness to block major BRICS moves like Pakistan's admission, has now been pushed into a corner. Trump's tariffs forced its hand, and by choosing its BRICS partners over the US, India has removed a vital ally from Washington's strategy in Asia. Geopolitical analyst Glenn Deason, who has been a frequent guest on our channel, says it best. The US is angry that India chose China and Russia over it. This is wrong. The US threatens India with the ultimatum of us or them, while China and Russia do not. India chose independence and freedom to decide its own foreign policy. This past week's conference wasn't just transformative for India-China relations, it was a turning point for Asia as a whole. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, was originally founded as a security bloc to help Asian countries combat separatism, extremism, and terrorism. Remarkably, it even managed to bring historic rivals, India and Pakistan, into cooperation under the same framework. But what began as a narrowly focused security organization has steadily expanded its mission year after year. Today, the SCO has evolved into a platform addressing nearly every dimension of the emerging multipolar world, and this year's summit was the most ambitious yet. President Xi Jinping set the tone from the start that the point of this summit was to prepare for the post-US world order. In his opening statement, he delivered a thinly veiled challenge to the United States, declaring, "The world has entered a new phase of turbulence and a new crossroads. The shadows of Cold War mentality and bullying have not dissipated, and new challenges continue to mount." Among the summit's most prominent goals was the call for joint efforts to build a more just and balanced international governance framework, one where countries, regardless of size, wealth, or population, are treated as equals. The vision outlined was nothing less than a complete transformation of global institutions like the UN into a system where every nation has an equal voice in shaping the future order. One of the biggest critiques centers on the United Nations, where the United States and its Western allies hold a wildly disproportionate share of global influence. The Security Council's 5 permanent members are the US, France, the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. Yet the entire global south has virtually no representation. India, the world's most populous nation and the 3rd largest economy by purchasing power parity, doesn't even have a seat, nor do other regional powers with hundreds of millions of people, like Brazil or Indonesia. Meanwhile, countries whose global prominence peaked decades ago, such as the UK and France, remain permanent members with veto power, and that veto power has been repeatedly abused. The US and its allies have used it to shield their interests, blocking overwhelmingly popular measures, such as ending the blockade on Cuba or condemning Israel for its ongoing crimes in Gaza. The result is a global governance system tilted towards the West's minority interest at the expense of the majority of humanity. But this summit was by no means all talk. The participating members agreed to a flurry of tangible commitments and projects that will reshape Eurasia starting from this day forward. One of the most significant announcements was the massive new pipeline project, Power of Siberia 2, which will connect Russia to China through Mongolia and build on the existing Power of Siberia 1. This is another massive energy pillar for China, a huge revenue boost for the Russian economy, and a key point of cooperation with SCO member Mongolia, creating a clear win-win-win for the entire region. The imagery couldn't be more stark. A twin pipeline system supplying cheap Russian gas mirrors exactly the situation Europe enjoyed with Nord Stream 1 and 2 until the United States government sabotaged them during the Ukraine conflict. Instead of forging their own path, striking major deals with China, or pursuing peace talks with Russia, European leaders have bent over backwards to please the US government, the very government that destroyed their cheap energy and their economies. Honestly speaking, the incompetence of European politicians and their vassalization to Washington is simply astounding. And of course, no serious discussion of the multipolar world is complete without talking about de-dollarization. At this summit, member states reaffirmed their commitment to expanding trade in local currencies. But the real game changer came with the announcement of the SCO Development Bank. This development bank is a bold challenge to the Western-controlled World Bank and IMF. The bank will back innovative financing, from digital initiatives to green projects, putting the power of development back in the hands of the Global South. This is a massive milestone in the bloc's long-term plan of creating a payment system that operates entirely out of Washington's control. As if the SCO summit wasn't enough, just 2 days later, China followed it up with a massive military parade, marking the 80th anniversary of its victory over Japanese aggression in World War II. The SCO summit showcased China's vision for peaceful development, but the parade reminded everyone about the firepower to back up that vision. The message was unmistakable. China welcomes cooperation, but if you try to mess with it, you'll be facing a military that can hold its own against anyone. Predictably, Western media rushed to spin it as aggression, but that narrative falls apart under basic scrutiny. The parade explicitly stated that China's armed forces are defensive in nature and a deterrent, not a tool for foreign conquest. The parade also had two major goals. First, that China will never again allow itself to be devastated as it was in World War II. And second, a direct warning to Washington. This is not a war you want to fight. Fear-mongering concerns proved to be nothing more than Western projection. Leaders from across the global South showed up in force, underscoring both China's growing diplomatic reach and its ability to represent the true global majority. In total, 26 leaders from 26 different countries were in attendance. Among them were major players outside the West, including prime ministers from Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Pakistan, Belarus, and many more marginalized countries, all showing clear solidarity with China. By contrast, Europe was almost entirely absent. Only two European leaders, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico and Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, made the trip to Beijing. Their small numbers highlighted just how little independent foreign policy remains on the European continent. Beyond these two Balkan nations, there are only a handful of Western figures willing to define the prevailing narrative. Former Australian and New Zealand prime ministers were in attendance, alongside former Japanese Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama, one of the very few Japanese politicians who has ever fully acknowledged and apologized for Japan's wartime aggression. To this day, Japan has never issued a formal apology for its role in World War II, making Hatoyama's stance not just rare, but a complete outlier in his country's politics. But no guest stood out more than North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russia's Vladimir Putin, who flanked Xi Jinping on the red carpet. The image was unmistakable. Three of Washington's biggest foreign policy targets standing shoulder to shoulder in unity, and it sent a message straight to the White House, one that was clearly not well received. Donald Trump took to Truth Social with an incredibly bitter post, trying to center the entire moment into being all about America's role in the conflict. America's participation in World War II was admirable, and for once, on the right side of history. But let's not forget, it was China that was invaded, and it was China that sacrificed a staggering 20 million people. Centering the United States in China's history is both insulting and done in complete bad faith. And as if this lack of sincerity wasn't already clear enough, Trump finished by writing, "Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." Seriously, name me one country on earth that would want to work with this man. What kind of message does this send to Putin about the sincerity of Ukraine peace talks after Trump had literally just met with him in Alaska only weeks ago? Why would Modi tie himself closer to this chaos? Why would Xi Jinping give rare earth minerals to someone sending bitter, threatening messages on social media? Apart from the US vessels in Europe, Trump has completely lost all credibility. Just months ago, the United States embarrassed itself on the world stage with a hollow, unimpressive military parade featuring outdated equipment and low attendance, a stark contrast to what was on display in Beijing this week. And this entire situation is a mess of Donald Trump's own making. Everyone, we're going to continue monitoring everything coming out of Beijing, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, and everything that is featuring in this new multipolar world. But there is one question that remains, and it's something that many geopolitical experts are now wondering. How strong is China's military? And can it compete with other powerful militaries around the world? Interesting enough, this will be the exact topic of our next episode as we take a deep dive into China's military, showing you exactly what was on display in Beijing and give you the simple facts and the truth that Western media will not accurately report. Everyone, stay tuned for that episode next week on the channel, and thank you for making it to this point of the video. As always, I appreciate your incredible support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.